So howdy, my name's Mark, and I'm here to talk about a new kind of tool called a persona editor. All right? And I've been pitching this tool for 5 years, and nobody really understands what I'm talking about. But one of the things about being ahead of the curve is that if you wait long enough, history catches up with you. And so we're going to talk about a number of trends and different things that are going on and why this tool is ready today. And what I'm basically doing is I'm open sourcing the ideas. I'm putting it out there for anybody and all you programmers out there who want to copy it. It's on YouTube, that's great. And because the tool really needs to get built, okay? And I call it a persona editor, okay? And one of the things about where we're at right now is that we're entering into an era where two-way APIs are becoming apparent. Going back to Amazon, when you can pull data out of Amazon, that was great, but that's reading the data, okay? What we also need to be able to do is to write the data back in. And by creating this kind of two-way street, you end up with a level playing field, which then prevents lock-in. Right? So this is a big chess game that we're going on here with all these giant behemoths and big co-platforms, and us small little guys as independents want to be able to play along with the big guys. And to do that, we need a level playing field, and we need two-way APIs. In fact, let me quote from a former Googler who just happened to be talking about this in a video interview, I think it was yesterday.
Sign into a site, have your profile and your friends there, literally in 2 clicks, and suddenly, and to the extent where people don't actually realize they've just done it, it's just the site works and it feels right. And what I see is in a year's time, people will expect that, and the whole dig the invite out of your spam folder approach is going to be dead, and people will be wondering why on earth you would still do that. And I think there's a massive sea of things we can build with this, and those pieces are in place. The pieces that aren't fully there yet, the activity stream stuff that we're still iterating on and saying, okay, can we move these actions between sites in a way that's consistent? Yeah. We're getting there. We've got some ways of reading them from sites. We haven't got good ways of writing them to sites yet, or round-tripping them, but it's getting closer. And a lot of that is the similar process of saying, what do these things have in common? Oh, there's a larger common space than we thought, and keep growing it. Mm-hmm.
All right, so that common space that Kevin was referring to is the essence of open standards. You see, Friendster didn't invent making a friend. Orkut, MySpace, Facebook, they've all built on these common notions of people, of services, of content. All right? And so I've actually been studying this stuff for a long time, and I'm a toolsmith. And for me, having a Swiss Army knife, this perfect tool that's designed specifically for this open environment, that's what I'm here to talk about. Okay? So the beginnings of this premise of this tool is that, that we need two-way APIs. So as Kevin was saying, is that we're just now getting to the point where these two-way APIs are there. In fact, OpenSocial is one of the examples of two-way APIs. All right, that I can just as easily write data into a system as pull it out, okay? And we're not being prejudiced to what this data is or how it's used at all. It literally could be profile information, it could be your list of friends, it could be your photographs, it could be your blog posts, whatever. But when something goes in, it should be able to come out and vice versa. And with that, as long as you adhere to those standards, we then have a true open web, okay? So what I'm here to do is to talk about this new kind of a tool. As I said, I've been pitching it for years, and if Google wants to buy me and whatever, and I can see all the venture capitalists in the room, and hi, Megan Smith, and all you guys. And so, but the key thing is that tools today only do one or two things. Right? And we can analyze the history of how we got here and all these people who were copycatting Director and Photoshop during the 90s. And in fact, it got to the point where tools became a bad word. If you went into a venture capitalist and you said, I want to make a tool, they say, sorry, we don't do tools anymore. Right? They're now called services or whatever. But most of these tools that are out there, they offer you this great thing. You bring your data all into it, and guess what? You're locked in. There's no way to get the data back out. All right? So tools today are just another form of lock-in. All right? So we need tools that are explicitly designed for this open web. All right, so this persona editor looks like an outliner. Now, are you all familiar with an outliner? Right? Back in the 80s, outliners were actually a category of tool. you'd sit there and type a heading. You'd hit the carriage return, hit the tab, and you would indent in. And then you would type something. And it was like, sometimes they were called thought processors. And you'd write an idea and hit the carriage return, write an idea, hit the carriage return. And then you'd have this whole category and hierarchy. And you'd go back and add things in, all right? So I was part of building a tool called a web outliner. So if you can imagine an outliner online, like a Google app, but at any node of the hierarchy, it could be a link, it could be a media file, it could be a reference to another outline, okay? And so that's what I mean when I use the word outliner, that's what I'm talking about, all right? So now let's imagine these outliners being able to hold every kind of data there is. And the outliner itself is a normalizing effect that can pull in any kind of open web data, and it makes it equal. So I could pull in my Amazon account, my Facebook account, my blog, and my eBay stuff. And I could have them all lined up together, and then I can drag and drop between these different outlines, or create a new one, all right? So that's really what we're talking about here. Now, once we have two APIs, and so realize that ideas have to time with the movement of the marketplace. So as the marketplace starts to evolve and these two APIs are appearing, you want to hit it right. The metaphor is surfing, where you're hanging 10, right? And exactly as that wave comes in, you catch that wave, right? And that's the idea of developing this tool, okay? So the idea is that with one of these two APIs, we can synchronize all this data. Now, the way people think of tools today is that this data comes into your tool and stays there, but if you can imagine with two APIs, the tool can be a utility. So you could pull the data in, do something to it, and send it back right from where it came, or send it to all these other locations. And that's really the essence of this tool. So now imagine there's all these different kinds of data, right? And in this hierarchy here, I've got friends and feeds and media and content. As I double click on media, I dive into images. And within images, I have my WordPress gallery, my Flickr gallery, and then I double click on Flickr, and I dive in, and I go into my sets. And so at that particular node, in the hierarchy, the node recognizes that these are photographs and puts up little thumbnail displays because it understands what that data type is, all right? So now, the very cool thing about this, about having it be built into a general purpose outliner, is that when you think of something, a structure, and the active term here is personal knowledge base, right? As I'm organizing my stuff, whatever it is, only you know how you want to organize your stuff, right? So if you say, this is for Monday, and this is when I'm going to Argentina, and this is blue, that's how you want to organize your stuff. Everyone organizes their stuff differently, right? So you use this hierarchical outliner to structure things the way you think of it, right? But now, with this notion of having any kind of data type, in Argentina, I could have photographs, I could have phone numbers, I could have a web feed, I could have statistics, I could have any kind of data all under Argentina. And that very next hierarchy, I could have any other kind of combination of data, all right? So that's the idea of using tagging and thinking of categorization with the outliner means that you have a completely flexible model. There are no constraints to what you want to do, all right? And that's a key thing about building a tool. Quick story. I don't know if you all know what my first life was. I created a company called Macromind, that was Macromedia, and we developed a tool called Director. So Director used the timeline notational system. And we didn't know what people were going to do with that tool. All right? So some people did marketing, some people did video games, some people did interactive art, but that was the point. It was a general purpose tool. This is what's missing in the open web today. All tools do one thing. The closest we could come to it today might be Twitter, in that it does one thing, but it can be used a lot of different ways. But most tools only do one or two specific things. This tool is designed to do like 20 or 30, all right? Okay, so here I've got this new kind of tool, and all these nodes of the hierarchy can represent new kind of structures, and I can create these mashups on the fly. Now, the only thing that's similar to that today is Yahoo Pipes, which can take all these RSS feeds, and you set up some rules, and you can build up these mashups. But they're only based upon RSS feeds. So if you can imagine that, just going out to everything, all right? All right, so as I've been pitching this to people, one of the cool things about this, because I've literally been pitching this for 5 years, right? When people hear it, they echo back to me what they think they're hearing. And I got some feedback from the guys at Yahoo, and they said, oh, so what you're doing is you're combining static data with dynamic data. And I went, absolutely, right on. What a great way to put it. You don't mind if I quote you, do you? So anyway, I'm giving Neil Semple and Cody Sims credit, okay? Anyway, so that's the idea, that there's all this different kind of stuff all in this one outline, all right? All right, now I'm glad that we have some interns here today. A camera cut over to the interns, okay. And so we're gonna start off slow and simple, okay? Oh, let's just pretend like you're proxying for venture capitalists, because we would hate to confuse them too much, right? So we need a solution today so we can fund you today to build a product for today. And the problem we're gonna solve is CD players don't only play CDs from Tower Records. But yet, when you buy a song from iTunes, it can only play back in iTunes. So just imagine a tool that allowed me to create a playlist of songs from iTunes, from Rhapsody, from Amazon. All right? So that's the idea of this editor. Right? And now imagine this playlist of all these different songs. I happen to have used reggae as an example, but I bought all this music from all these different sources, and I can combine them together. Because one of the key things, as I said earlier, is that we're normalizing the open web. So once I can load things into this outliner, I can then drag and drop all these songs, assemble a playlist, and do what I want to do. Right? This is the way it should have worked all along, right? So now let's look at how the outliner would display these three services, okay? So there's iTunes, Amazon, and Rhapsody. I've used the structure of iTunes. iTunes has playlists, artists, and songs. I dive down into the artists. You can see the artists in those songs, right? But Amazon does it slightly differently. They call them MP3 albums, whatever. But the point is that it all flows into this standard outliner, okay? And I can drag and drop to build the playlists, okay? So the idea here is that any of the nodes of this hierarchy of the outline could be anything. So in this case, back here, I've used the top node to represent the service. I've used the next node, the next level of the hierarchy to represent the structures of the service, and then the third level to be the actual data, okay? Okay, so now let's use an example of photographs, all right? So here, the challenge is that I've got all these different photographs, a whole bunch in Flickr, a whole bunch in Facebook, a whole bunch in WordPress, and I want to organize things around the way I logically think of them. My family, my work, and my fun, okay? So I drag all these things in and I organize it around family, work, and fun. Now that I've got it all organized, now I can keep them in sync. So as I'm uploading things to Flickr and uploading things to Facebook, whatever, as they're categorized and tagged the right way, they would then reshuffle themselves and send themselves back to Flickr and Facebook under these structures I set up called family, work, and fun. You see? That's where the human being comes in and puts structure around things, right? That's where tagging comes in. We, collectively, as an industry, very much dropped the ball on tagging. We got to the level of Flickr tags and Technorati tags and Delicious, but we don't use those tags to connect ourselves together. That's the whole point of the web, the open web, is to connect things together, right? All right, so how do you pull this off? Again, this is for the baby spooning the venture capitalist version of this idea, right? Oh, what's that? Oh, well, it's called Outliner. It's called two-way APIs. It's called the open web. Have you heard of the open web? Yes, but I need to patent this technology, and I need to control it and own it. And I go, sorry. I get the shadow up there. Sorry, no way, dude. No one owns it. Everyone can use it, and anybody can improve it. All right, so this is the first quiz of today's lecture. Can you tell me where that quote is from? It's a book called The World of Ends by Doc Searles and Dave Weinberg. Okay, moving on. So, getting a little denser, the outliners are the perfect metaphor for a tool, all right? And this is a kind of an abstract notion of how the hierarchies can be seen. There's this top-level stuff, the categories, the subcategories. And so you can just imagine that any kind of data, any structures can be filled into that. You indent the node. You promote the node. You can create structures the way you think. All right? Everything is a URL. Well, thank God I'm here at Google and I don't have to explain that. We could have a debate over, is it URL or URI? But I think you get the point, right? It's all up in the cloud. Everything is in the cloud. And when the entire BBC archives, or the New York Times, or NPR, and all of those books, and all that information is all there, now we're ready to start building these incredible new kind of things, right? That's where we need a new kind of tool. All right. So now let's get more specific. So here is an ID hub. So there is a system put up by Jan Rain called RPX. And what they do is they propose that, yes, we love OpenID, but there's a whole bunch of people with Yahoo IDs and a whole bunch of people with Google IDs and Microsoft IDs. So we shouldn't force them or expect that they're going to change over to OpenID. So an ID hub is an interface where you can come in and log in with whatever the hell ID you have. All right? So imagine an outline of my ID hub. All right? So there's my Yahoo, my Google, my Facebook. Oh, there's my Facebook. Double click on Facebook, open up. Oh, look, there's my profile. There's my friends. There's my feeds, right? You see, so whatever the ID is, that's that node, and I double click and open up. And this example shows Facebook ID being opened up, okay? Now, all the principles of editing, all the principles of WYSIWYG, cut, copy, paste, CRUD, send message, synchronization, all that is applied to this kind of data. So if I want to go copy Wes Taylor, Command C, and go over somewhere else and Command V, I can do that. And that whole profile thing went with it, okay? Okay, so once this stuff is in there, I can then sort and search and filter. And thank God I'm at Google, I don't have to explain that. And then I could manage my data, right? So it's all in there, and I can back it up and move it around and do all sorts of new kind of structures, hit new, you know, all that kind of stuff. And I can manage my friends. So again, I've got this list of all these different people, and in this case, I got those different services, and I double click on Facebook, and sure enough, there's my friends. And the node recognizes that those are profiles and puts up little thumbnails of the faces, right? So the tool is smart enough to recognize what the data is that it's rendering, okay? Here's one of my favorites, which is my blog archives. So this blog here was from 2001 to 2003. This was 2004, 2005. This is my current blog. I've got them all over the place. I've got artwork, I've got posts, and I want to organize them all in one place. And so this is what an outliner, and I've got an account over on Vox, and I'm doing other blogging elsewhere, and I want all those blog posts in one place so that later on I can go retrieve them and organize them. So one of the cool things about the synergy of this strategy is that once you understand the outliner, and you're comfortable with an outliner, and by the way, when you're in Internet Explorer, that's an outliner, right? The file system is an outliner, right? And when you go into the Finder in the Macintosh, that's an outliner, right? So these are things that our reptilian brain understands. People understand outliners, all right? And so what we're going to do is we're going to use these outliners for a lot of different purposes, but it's the same damn outliner, okay? So let's start off with the personal knowledge base. So here I am organizing all my stuff across however I want to organize it, and I'm using the example of food, because unless it's not obvious, I'm a foodie, okay? So I've got all this food, and some of the food is about photos and the restaurants, and here's restaurants in San Francisco. And then over here in the Yahoo world, I've got restaurants, but these are actually reviews of restaurants, and these are photographs of reviews of restaurants, right? So I'm gonna map them over to this logical structure called food, and in that logical structure, there are restaurants, recipes, and nutritional information, right? Now, once I've got that logical structure, I then want to map it into my knowledge base. And again, we could have debate. We could have entire Google Tech Talks on knowledge bases, and what kind of knowledge base do you do, and is it blah, 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 or blah, 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 right? So this is my version of a knowledge base. This leads to what I call a persona, and this is where one of the benefits of the tool come in, all right? So let me explain. So here I spend all this time, and I'm gonna go visual here, so sorry, microphone. Oh, sorry. All right, so over here was this raw data. I organized it into logical structures. I then take those logical structures and I map them into personas. And what do I mean by a persona? Well, there's me, the chubby software guy who comes down to Google and rants and raves. Let's see, that's this guy, okay? And then there's me, the dad, whose daughter's on the swim team, you know, and there's a swim team website. And there's me, the legendary party guy, who helped reinvent partying in the 80s, who had the extreme posse and flash mobs in the 90s, who's the legalized marijuana advocate in the aughts, and proud of it, and don't drink a drip of alcohol, okay? So I got 3 completely different personas of my life. Now, some people keep their personas completely compartmentalized. They don't mix and match them. But if I had a photograph over here and I want to use it over there, I got to literally log in under a different username and password and assume a different persona. Why is the tool called a persona editor? Because the same knowledge base and all this data, so here's the raw data, the logical structures of the data, then can be mapped into my personas. And more times than not, you're not going to want to come to my website to see about my persona. You're going to want to have it be a widget and appear inside the swim team's website, inside of Facebook, inside of wherever the hell, okay? That's the essence of the distributed web. You don't expect people to come to you, you go to them, all right? So what this persona editor does is it allows me to edit and manage my personal knowledge base and then map this stuff into these more or less arbitrary buckets. Hello, sir. So you'll have to rewind for the first 20 minutes, but okay. All right, so we were just talking about the persona, why it's called a persona editor. And so I've got these logical structures that I map into these widgets. These widgets happen to be me, the dad, me, the guru, and me, the party boy, okay? Okay, so here I am managing these personas, and now I can cut, copy, paste, and edit, and drag and drop between the personas. So that's pretty coolio, I think, all right? And once I have these personal knowledge bases, to me, you know, the history of technology is about consumer stuff that leaks over to enterprise, and enterprise stuff that leaks over to consumer. And knowledge bases is something that's been around 10, 20 years in the enterprise world, because every enterprise wants to get a handle and their arms around all the stuff that's theirs. But most humans just scatter their shit to the wind and they're all over the place and the world gets more and more complicated and along comes Twitter and things get more and more complicated. And so, but we do need knowledge management of our own stuff. A great example would be a family that everyone's buying different CDs and music, right? And dad goes, gosh, shouldn't we have a server down in the basement? It's all our media collection. Everybody in the family shares off that media server. That would be a great example of the family knowledge base. Okay, so I've actually been working on this tool for a while, and we've mocked up some user interfaces and how it would look. I've got a working example of this I'll show you in a second, but here is an example of normalizing the web. So Dave, we were going over all the different ways we're going to use the outliner. We were talking about using it for personal knowledge base. Now we're going to talk about for normalizing the web, the open web. Because there's all this disparate kind of data. And so here I've got an example of a Yahoo account, a People Aggregator account, and an Always On account. They'd line up. And by the way, this was done 5 years ago, way before TweetDeck. All right? So over on the left-hand side is the internal account. Then those 3 in the middle are the external accounts that I'm rendering. And then over on the right-hand side is whatever node I've selected, that's the dive down into that node. Because one of the things about outlines, because they could be really deep, they have lots and lots of stuff underneath the node. And so over on the right-hand side would be the particular node I've got selected. And then along the bottom would be this tray that would hold all these different accounts. You can see I've got 3 up right now, but I could well have 30 or 50 different accounts that I'm working with. So all those accounts will be along the bottom. Okay, so now we're going to get some other pretty exciting stuff. So if I've got a normalized web, and I'm managing this personal knowledge base, and I can render any kind of data into the outline. Now let's imagine I could build these new kind of dynamic structures. Structures that stay in sync. Dave, one of the things you missed is I was ranting about two-way APIs. I showed a recent Kevin Marks interview where he was talking about that we can read stuff, we can't necessarily write it yet. OpenSocial is one of the first ones to do that, but we're waiting for the whole web to be able to do that, to have two APIs, to have a level playing field. So now let's imagine we have all that stuff, and we're now going to build a new kind of dynamic structure. And I'm going to use a college reunion as an example. You young interns don't know what it's like, but when you have a gray beard like me and Dave, you yearn back for the old days. Those old college roommates, and you wonder whatever happened to so-and-so. So let's imagine that this was a college reunion. And okay, so this is like, over there is a display of what it would look like in the outline, but now let me show it to you rendered in that UI I just showed you, okay? So here I'm an Oberlin graduate, and I just came back from my college reunion, and I've got some friends in Facebook, some friends in MySpace, a whole bunch of photographs in Flickr, and the college website put up an XLS file of the statistics of the class of 1980, which would mean that it's soon a 30-year anniversary for me graduating school. Okay, all right, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go create new. I'm going to hit new, all right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag faces of friends from Facebook and MySpace over into this Oberlin class reunion structure, all right? And when I do that, it comes up and says, well, you're going to track this guy Aaron. How much of Aaron's stuff do you want to track? Right? Do you want to track his photos? You want to track this? You want to track that? And you're going to see these activity streams and this stuff all offer this kind of stuff soon, okay? All right, the next thing I do is I drag some photos from Flickr into this system, and I also drag this XLS file of the class statistics. Now, the next thing I want to do is that, because the key thing here of the two APIs is that though I'm over here in this tool, and I'm pointing at all these external things, and I'm bringing it in here, and I'm creating this new structure, I now want to send it back from whence it came. Having it over here in my tool does not achieve the goal. That's just another lock-in strategy. This tool has to be like a utility so that I can send it back to Facebook, send it back to MySpace. Of course, the trick would be is, can these systems even understand this, whatever the hell it is? Can OpenSocial render this dynamic community? Probably OpenSocial, of all these things, probably OpenSocial will be one of the first ones that could, all right? But the idea is that it's a round trip. It's a two-way experience, all right? So now once everything gets put into this outline, this outliner becomes this unifying principle around what I call digital lifestyle aggregation. That was something I figured out about 7 or 8 years ago. And social networking and Twitter and friend feed are parts of that equation. There's a tool called Plum. There are lots of different tools, Glue. There's lots of different tools that kind of treat this DLA, this digital lifestyle aggregation, in different ways. And that's a good thing. We don't want to have one way to do things, okay? So, but the idea of the tool is that as directed was to multimedia, so will this tool be to the open web. Now, back in those days, those tools were proprietary. There was no such thing as open source, and I'll pay penance for helping to create one of the greatest lock-in strategies ever. All right. So I've been flagellating myself and whipping and trying to make up for that, and that's a lot of what this is about: is open sourcing these ideas and hoping that a lot of people, all those programmers in the room today, will pick up these ideas and run with it. All right? So it's a tool that does a lot of different things. It's like a Swiss Army knife, right? So that's this is this prototype, and I think I can just show this right now, if we don't mind. Okay, working prototype. So I go here, and this is how I choose all the different accounts, right? And by the way, one of the things of the business model would be that you'd let them play with, let's say, 8 or 10 accounts for free forever. But when you really start using the tool and it becomes very productive, then you let them have unlimited number of accounts, right? So I go over here and I say, oh, look, here's this account. And I say, oh, look, here's this account. And oh, look, here's that account, right? So these are little hierarchies. And remember earlier I showed you the blog archive? Right? So this would be my blog archive right there. Because remember, within one account, I might have blogs and photos and friends and all this different kind of stuff, right? And as I select this over here, you can see there is that node being selected. But if I select it here for my RSS feeds, there's my RSS. Now, this version of this prototype was using this source code to something called the Web Outliner. And I can go over here, switch over to this tab, and sure enough, oops. This is an outliner. And I can hit the carriage return and create hierarchies that I can indent in. And any of these nodes can be an RSS feed, it can be a media module. And so this is all kind of a working, functioning thing. I go back over here, I go select that guy, I go copy it over here. So this would be my internal file. So if I was building something new, I'd be dragging over here and putting into that new area there. Okay? So that is the prototype. Continuing on. Well, now that we've got that far, let me close with what I'm working on now. So 5 years, I've been pitching this. It's one of the reasons why I'm leaving, because nobody fucking understands what I'm talking about, okay? But what I have figured out is dashboards. And we all saw the federal spending dashboard announcement last week, right? Where Vivek Kundra now has a dashboard that will track every single IT contract in the US government. And you can go in and see what was the original proposal, what they were charging you, incredible levels of transparency. And it's really great that they're using the term dashboard, because a dashboard is a generic kind of term that can be applied to something like that, which is literally like an enterprise ERP dashboard. But I also consider the About Me page in a blog tool to be your personal dashboard, and your profile page in a social network to be your dashboard, and the Contact Us page in a commercial website to be a dashboard. So if we could kind of normalize dashboards and say, well, everything's a dashboard in one sense, and each dashboard gets an outline, all right? So here's the outline schema. So just like micro formats are machine-readable tags that can be read, now imagine this outline that's machine readable, that in the top node is the XRD thing, which says, well, this is what's in this dashboard. The next one is my ID hub. So in the case of an individual person, it's all my little username, password things. But for a company, it might be something completely different. The third hierarchy is a social information. So those could be your customer list, it could be your friend list, it could be whatever. The fourth one is your feeds. This enables distributed computing. This enables distributed architecture. Let me give you an example. So we know the power of Facebook Connect and what they call dynamic privacy. And as long as they've got the tether and they're in control of everything, then great. A drunk teenager can put their naked photo up on a Friday night. As they wake up from their binge on Sunday morning, they could retract the access privileges, and then everyone who's adhering to the rules of Facebook Connect would take that photo down, okay? But how do we do that in a distributed manner, all right? So imagine that over here in my list of social information was the list of all the people that I've granted access to this particular photograph. And then down there in number 7 is the list of the actual photographs. And then what number 5 is about is the list of those actual roles. This is a family role. These are the rules of this role. These are my colleagues. This is my, whatever the thing is that you want to create a group of the access of, you publicly display that in this hierarchy. And that way anybody can come along, look and say, oh, okay, these are the people who get access, these are the photographs he has access to, and these are the roles he's got. And you can do that for friending, you can do that for lots of different kind of stuff. In fact, I think I have a list here, right? So we could do that. For instance, one of my favorites is aggregating musical tastes, all right? So I like describes your musical taste one way, Pandora does it another way, Last.fm does it another way, right? But doesn't you, the user, want to have one thing that's my musical tastes, right? So if those 3 services would support this kind of outline structure, we could have some kind of normalized way to, of course, there's always going to be differences, but there's some common overlap between the 3. Aggregating groups is another example, where a Yahoo group is this, a Google group is that, and Facebook is something else, but it's all about reggae. So why can't we have some common way to connect these things together, right? So that's the notion of these dashboard outlines. So, of course, the point being that then that's your dashboard outline, your file, that's literally the virtual thing that you then move around from Facebook to Google to whatever. Thank you very much. Did it in 50 minutes. All right, so now the torrent of questions. Usually I say is, please interrupt me at any time, but wasn't too much interruption. But does that make sense at all or what? So it's a crazy kind of tool idea. And I figured as I was leaving Silicon Valley, at least do some droppings along the way out, to say, I think this kind of tool. In fact, when I pitched this to Microsoft, Angus Logan, as we were leaving the meeting, said, so Mark, could this be the tool for Windows Live? Yes. It would edit every kind of data that's in Windows Live.
So are you planning to start building this as an open social application, as an example?
Okay, so, yeah. So everything costs money. And so the way I tell the people in Ohio is I say, look, I wouldn't be moving to Ohio if I had money. So it's going to be one of those, but it's one of those stories like he came to town with $7 in his pocket and look what he built, right? So yeah, I really want to build this. It's going to cost millions of dollars. So without somebody giving me the money, and though I would love to, I even pitch SAP on this, right? So, I mean, I'll pitch it to anybody to build it, right? But it's one of those kind of timeless ideas that could probably wait another 2-3 years and not be ruined, right? Whereas right now I'm going to be building this digital city in Cleveland or northeastern Ohio. So, but of course that digital city would require one of these tools. But there's like all this kind of day-to-day stuff to do first. But it wouldn't be just an open social thing. It would be a web-based app, and open social would be one of the output formats that it would support. Question?
Concerning the reactions of venture capitalists, did they change from 5 years ago to what they think today?
Oh no, they're exactly the same as they are. You'd think that they would get a clue, but they don't. Because see, understand venture capital, and this is not to fault them, but they're standing at the table, at the crap table, and they've got the dice, and they're throwing the dice, and they're going for Twitter or YouTube, and that's all they're interested in. Now, there's a misnomer out there in the real world, certainly in Cleveland. The venture capitalists are about funding companies that help workforce development and create jobs. And that's a misnomer. That's not what venture capitalists are about. They're in it for the money, and they would rather put 100 bets on 100 really stupid ideas that one of them turns into a YouTube than put 100 investments into sound business practices. The company may not go public, it may not be some wild success, but it employed 72 people and makes a profit. That's not what venture capitalists are interested in. As long as you understand that, then you can understand their rose-colored glasses and the filters that they put up. They're only interested in playing the insider's game. Now what gets really weird is that every
That's a pretty broad brush.
Oh, absolutely. But I get to do that because I was the third. I was the third software company that Kleiner Perkins ever invested in. Okay.
And KP is the epitome of that style of.
Exactly. Right. So
they are and some firms have exactly that model. And there's a whole spectrum.
Well, yeah. So, but here's the thing. So they could talk the good talk. Like I could tell you all about the VCs I've met in Cleveland. Right. What's interesting is that in the area of workforce development, where every government, whether it's federal, state, county, or municipal, all of them have as a responsibility, right after like security and power, is workforce development, to keep their citizens employed and to have jobs. And so if you ask them about how they do that, they sincerely think that by giving money to venture capitalists, that will generate jobs. And in every major city in America, there's government-funded venture capitalists. And they all open up their news readers and their newspapers, and they read about Kleiner Perkins and Sequoia. So they may talk the good talk about how we invest locally and all that, but at the end of the day, they're still doing just as stupid investments as everybody else. And there's like 25 entrepreneurs standing outside their door begging them for money. And if you didn't go to the right country club or you're not in the right church or synagogue, too bad. Because it is an insider's game.
To go back to the Kleiner, how to manage privacy, I wasn't sure, because at one point you talked about the Facebook distributed privacy aspect, and at another point in your demo you just copy the profile of one of your friends in Facebook, and maybe you're going to paste it on Output or something like that.
All right, so let me turn it around to you then. So if I imported stuff from Bebo into blah blah blah, how is that security promulgated? I mean, does that person who was a friend of a friend in Bebo have any control over what their profile has done to them over in this other app? I don't believe so, right?
So right now, at least in Open Social, each social network where your application is running have their own terms and conditions about what you can do with that profile. And Okay, you need to read into these, but I doubt that, like, taking my Orkut profile and pasting it in Facebook without me knowing about this is a good practice.
But it is technically possible, right? I mean, that's a social contract and a legal contract, but technically, Open Social enables that to happen, right?
Technically, yeah. I mean, you have an analog hall,
right,
that defeats all privacy.
Right.
Also.
And I seem to remember being in this very building.
You read nothing right. You couldn't write to my office.
But you could pull out. Right. Okay. Well, okay, so this gets really interesting because, in fact, not to brag, but 2 years ago when I first heard of Open Social, and I wasn't invited to the campfire, but I'm not complaining, I brought this up, right? Okay? All right. Now, so we, at one of our data sharing summits, put up a big grid on the wall. And what we said was, let's at first at least compare and track the policies of these different services. And that by hopefully putting a public attention to it, and Kevin literally wrote down all the things that Google did, and there were multiple columns for Google, but that's the first step of creating a social contract, right? And Dave and I know we tried to talk to Facebook about this very subject, right? So first you have to get the issue out there and talk about it. Now I'm proposing one way to solve that, all right? So that over here in the access controls, in theory, the industry would standardize and say, a family access control is this. It means X, Y, Z. For you, the user, to define your family, you're going to need a struct called family. Then, and then you're going to check this, and maybe there's a master registry that checks, are you part of my family? There's some other guy named Marc Canter down in LA. All those details of how those security levels get up. But certainly I can tell you in the future, it won't be these separate data silos, these separate worlds that each define their own set of access controls. That would be one of the things the Open Social Foundation would work towards.
So you're talking about a standard for access control?
Yes. Yeah, for distributed access controls. Because right now we've got a great example of how to do it in a data silo with Facebook. Now, what's fascinating, Dave, I mean, in the past year, since this has all been happening, they are continuing to push the envelope. I mean, this is a company, there was a line that Jerry Yang used to say, is that every day I wake up and I worry about the next 3 billion hits, right? So clearly Jerry Yang was sleeping late, right? I mean, he fell asleep, right? Mark Zuckerberg, I'm not sure if he ever sleeps. I mean, this guy is on a torrential rate that's never been seen before, the amount of innovation and things that are happening. So just when I think they're done and they can't possibly be more open, they push it further. But it's still tethered. So we're seeing the definition of this compromise, which to me, being on the outside, is a really good lesson into how to have your cake and eat it too. And all those things that they're doing, okay, fine, that's great that you're doing it. Now how will we do it open, truly open, right? So that's, in one sense, they're setting the agenda. It's very interesting. And I'm wondering I don't think they're even going to do another F8, right? I mean, that should have been now. That's when F8 was. Yeah, and I think what happens is they said, look, we're doing these things every other month, so why do it once a year? Anyway, so it's kind of fascinating to see those kind of politics unfold. And I'm still trying to figure out where each of these companies and what their agendas are, something like a 6 Apart or Jan Rain or and then you're going to see a Hadoop go down. I mean, it's like you really do need revenues. So that's why I'm going to Cleveland. You saw they announced how much they were making off of what? Yeah. It was interesting. There's a little bit here, a little bit there. It was good distribution. It wasn't just one thing. But I started off earlier saying that I think that Facebook really is the only company that Google fears. I think they're the only ones that can touch Google. In the sense that the way we think of targeted advertising today will get disrupted by some other way to do it. And I think they're the closest people to get there. It's funny, speaking of VCs in Cleveland, so they funded this company that claims they have a patented process for targeted advertising for music. It's like, oh my God. And we're in the law offices of this big fancy law firm. And I walked into the lawyer guy and I said, well, do you understand that there's like 25 companies that have this? Well, no, our research didn't find that. Well, you didn't do too good of a research. Well, because there's a thing in patent law that if you did too much research, right? So you don't do the research so you can tell the client, we haven't found anything. oh my God, and these young kids, all their money is being put into the patents. And there's, by definition, they're going to be out of business before they can even start. And that's the typical example of venture capitalists. So anyway. So that's it. So that's the pitch. We got it on video. Google, hi. Google. YouTube, hi. Chad, hi. Okay? And was that entertaining? All right. Thank you very much. Bye.